Picture this. New York City is no longer the king of finance. London, Hong Kong, and Singapore no longer sit at the top of global money markets. Instead, Toronto, yes, Toronto, the largest city in Canada, has risen to become the world's financial capital. How could that happen? What would it mean for Toronto, for Canada, and for the rest of the world? This what-if scenario is not just fun to imagine. It also opens the door to big questions about money, power, and the future of global cities. Stay with us, because this story is full of surprises. And before we begin, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to our channel, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us keep exploring fascinating ideas like this one. Toronto is already an important financial hub. Bay Street, often compared to Wall Street, is home to Canada's biggest banks, investment firms, and insurance companies. The Toronto Stock Exchange, or TSX, is one of the largest in the world, especially strong in sectors like mining, energy, and technology. Toronto also benefits from being one of the most multicultural cities on Earth, with talent coming from everywhere. But right now, Toronto is still considered a regional financial center rather than the global capital. The big players are New York, London, Hong Kong, and sometimes Singapore or Tokyo. So, what would it take for Toronto to leapfrog them all? First, let's imagine a turning point. Maybe New York suffers a financial crisis so deep that investors lose confidence. Maybe London continues to face political instability after Brexit. Maybe Hong Kong struggles with political pressures and Singapore can't keep up with population limits. Suddenly, investors, banks, and corporations begin looking for a new safe, stable, and growing home for global finance. Enter Toronto. What makes Toronto a strong candidate? Stability. Canada has one of the most stable banking systems in the world. In fact, during the 2008 global financial crisis, Canadian banks were praised for avoiding the risky practices that caused chaos elsewhere. Toronto would also benefit from Canada's reputation as a peaceful, democratic country with strong laws and protections. Global finance always looks for stability, and Toronto could offer exactly that. But stability alone isn't enough. For Toronto to become the world's financial capital, it would need scale. That means attracting not just Canadian banks, but the world's biggest players, from American giants like JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs to European and Asian institutions. Toronto would need to become the default headquarters for money. Picture skyscrapers not just filled with Canadian firms, but with global banks moving their centers of power to Bay Street. Now, let's talk about talent. Finance runs on brains as much as money. Toronto already has a strong pool of educated workers thanks to universities like the University of Toronto, York, and Ryerson. But to compete with New York or London, Toronto would need to become a magnet for the world's best financial minds. That means easier immigration, higher salaries, and a lifestyle that attracts people from everywhere. Luckily, Toronto already has an advantage. It is one of the most diverse cities in the world. More than half its residents were born outside Canada. This multicultural energy could make Toronto not just a financial hub, but a truly global hub. But let's not forget infrastructure. Right now, Toronto struggles with housing shortages, traffic jams, and aging transit. If it suddenly became the world's financial capital, millions more people would want to live and work there. Could the city handle it? Skyscrapers would rise higher, subways would need expansion, airports would need upgrades. Toronto would transform almost overnight into a mega financial city. Imagine Bay Street glowing with neon, filled with global firms buzzing day and night. Toronto's skyline would rival not just Chicago's or London's, but even Hong Kong's. Now, let's flip the lens. What would this mean for Canada? If Toronto became the world's financial capital, Canada's economy would explode in size. Money from around the world would flow into Canadian markets, creating jobs, wealth, and influence. Canada's dollar might become one of the world's reserve currencies, like the US dollar or the euro. That would mean countries everywhere would hold Canadian dollars as part of their financial security. Suddenly, Canada would not just be known for maple syrup, hockey, and forests, but as the very center of global money. But would there be downsides? Absolutely. With great wealth comes great inequality. Housing prices in Toronto, already high, could skyrocket beyond imagination. The cost of living could push out ordinary families. The city might risk becoming like other financial capitals, where billionaires thrive but average workers struggle. The culture of Toronto, known for being friendly and livable, could shift into a high-pressure, cutthroat financial environment. Would Toronto lose part of its soul in exchange for money? That's a real possibility. And what about the rest of Canada? If Toronto became the world's financial capital, would it overshadow other Canadian cities? Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary, and Ottawa might feel left behind as Toronto sucks in most of the money and talent. This could create new tensions inside the country, as power concentrates even more in Toronto. At the same time, though, a stronger Toronto could mean a stronger Canada overall, boosting the whole nation's influence on the global stage. Now let's think globally. If Toronto became the world's financial capital, it would change the balance of power. The US would lose one of its greatest advantages, New York as the global money center. Britain would lose its centuries-old role through London. Asia's rise through Hong Kong or Singapore would be slowed. Instead, power would shift to Canada, a country often seen as quiet and cautious. This could reshape international relations. Suddenly, world leaders would need to court Toronto as much as Washington, Beijing, or Brussels. Summits, deals, and negotiations might all center on Toronto. There's also the question of technology. Finance today is not just about trading floors and skyscrapers. It's about fintech, AI, blockchain, and digital currencies. Toronto has a growing tech scene, often called Silicon Valley North, with startups and research in AI leading the world. If Toronto combined its banking power with its tech talent, it could create a financial technology powerhouse. Imagine Toronto not just leading in traditional banks, but in the future of money itself. That could be the real key to overtaking New York and London. Of course, there are risks. Global finance brings global pressure. Toronto would become a target for cyber attacks, espionage, and even terrorism. Governments would need to strengthen security massively. Canada's quiet, safe image could change as it takes on the risks of being the world's financial heart. Are Canadians ready for that responsibility? That's a big question. Let's also think about lifestyle. If Toronto became the world's financial capital, the city would never sleep. Restaurants, hotels, airports, and entertainment would all expand. Luxury brands, high-end shopping, and global culture would pour in. But at the same time, would ordinary people still recognize the Toronto they grew up in? Would neighborhoods stay livable, or would they be overtaken by wealth and high prices? Cities like New York and London have both faced this challenge. Toronto would face it too. And yet, the dream is tempting. A Canada where Toronto is the global financial capital is a Canada with massive influence. Canadian leaders would shape global markets. Canadian voices would carry weight in international debates. A stronger dollar, a booming economy, a global reputation, these are powerful rewards. But here's the twist. Toronto doesn't need to replace New York or London to matter. Even now, it is climbing the ranks of global finance. Each year, more firms invest in Toronto. Each year, more tech startups connect finance with innovation. Maybe Toronto will never be number one. But maybe it doesn't have to be. Even being in the top 5 could transform the city and the country. So, what if Toronto became the world's financial capital? It would mean power, money, and influence like Canada has never seen. It would mean challenges with inequality, housing, and security. It would mean a Canada transformed from quiet middle power to global heavyweight. Whether that future is likely or not, it shows us something important. Toronto already has the seeds of greatness. The only question is whether those seeds will grow into the tallest tree in the global financial forest. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, comment your thoughts. Do you think Toronto could really overtake New York or London? And subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to us and helps us keep exploring big, bold, what-if questions about our future.